All right, today we're diving into a really sharp critique of the French political party La France Insoumise, or LFI for short. We're going to walk through the detailed argument laid out by lawyer Gilles William Goldenadel, breaking down his claims point by point to really get inside his perspective. Let's dive in.
So Goldenadel kicks things off with this old revolutionary slogan. But for him, this isn't just some dusty phrase from a history book. He sees it as the perfect summary of a core intolerance that he believes sits right at the heart of LFI's ideology today. In this explainer, we're going to unpack Goldenadel's entire argument, piece by piece. We'll look at the ideological roots he claims go back decades, the specific political moves he takes issue with, and what he sees as the pretty dire consequences for the future.
Okay, so here's the absolute foundation of Goldenadel's entire critique. He argues that to really understand LFI, you have to look past political strategy and see something deeper, a genuine, sincere conviction. And he really insists on this idea of sincerity. He just dismisses the notion that LFI's radical positions are just a way to get votes. He calls that a short view. In his mind, they are 100% genuine in their fight, and that, he believes, makes them all the more significant. And this is where his analysis gets, well, really provocative. Goldenadel lays out a theory on what he calls LFI's anti-white racism, and he tries to trace its origins way back through history. So you might be wondering, where does he think this so-called ideology actually came from? Well, in his view, it's not some new thing. He traces it back more than 70 years. Okay, so here's how Goldenadel lays it out, basically in 3 steps. He argues it all started after World War II with an unconscious shame among the European far left because they shared the same skin color as Adolf Hitler. He claims that this shame then kind of secreted a form of anti-white racism. And that brings us to today, where he sees it all coming together in this concept of creolization, a political idea that he defines as nothing less than the erasure of the white man. So Goldenadel draws this really direct and, pretty controversial line here. He's basically saying that LFI's alleged goal is the mirror opposite of the old far-right's obsession with the pure race. For him, it's the same kind of racialist thinking, just pointed in a completely different direction. And, of course, this brings us right to the party's leader, Jean-Luc Mélenchon. Goldenadel maps out what he describes as a total personal and ideological transformation. According to this analysis, the difference is just night and day. He describes the Mélenchon of the 90s as a laïcard, a hardcore defender of France's strict separation of church and state, who had this really strong anti-Catholic streak. But today, he sees a man who has totally embraced créolisation and what Goldenadel calls pro-Islamist causes, a complete metamorphosis in his view. And again, Goldenadel hammers this point about sincerity. He doesn't think this is just some cynical political move. He has the weakness, as he puts it, to believe that Mélenchon's change is totally genuine, that it's driven by a real shift in how he sees the world. Okay, so beyond that central theory, Goldenadel's critique widens out. He argues that LFI's entire ideology is built on what he calls a web of hatreds, a bunch of interconnected hostilities. He lays out 4 key pillars that he says define the party: hostility towards France itself, towards the police, a passionate anti-Zionism, and ultimately anti-Semitism. So let's break down each of these with the examples he gives. First up, anti-France. Goldenadel points to a video where Mélenchon is making fun of Joan of Arc. Now for him, this isn't just a joke. He reads it as a symptom of a much deeper detestation of the French people, their history, and their culture. Second, anti-police. He notes that, the far left has always had a thing against the police, but he claims LFI has modernized this hatred. It's no longer about cops breaking up strikes. Now the narrative is about a racist police force that's suppressing young people in immigrant neighborhoods. Third, anti-Zionism. And on this point, Goldenadel is absolutely blunt. He points to language he says the party uses, like describing Israel, a state born out of the Holocaust, as undergoing a Nazification, as proof of an extreme and total opposition. And finally, he argues this anti-Zionism spills over into straight-up anti-Semitism. He gives 2 examples. First, that Mélenchon revived the ancient, ugly trope of D-side by blaming Jesus's compatriots for his crucifixion. And second, that Mélenchon just reflexively labels any Jewish opponent a Zionist, even if they've never said a word about Israel.
So, after laying all that out, what's the bottom line? What are the stakes here? In the final part of his argument, Goldnettle gives this really stark warning about where he thinks this is all heading.
He uses that famous metaphor, the canary in the coal mine. In his view, all the hostile rhetoric aimed at Jewish people and the state of Israel isn't just an isolated issue. He sees it as an early warning sign of a much broader threat to Western society as a whole. And this brings us to one of his key frustrations. He argues that despite what he sees as LFI's blatant extremism, the party is basically met with a lukewarm bath of acceptance. He says he's still waiting to see a major newspaper editorial just come out and call Mélenchon an anti-Semite. He thinks the party just isn't paying a high enough price. So this all builds up to one final question. If things keep going down this road, what does he think is actually going to happen? And his prediction is, well, it's pretty bleak. He sees a future where LFI could take power through an alliance with Islamists. But in his scenario, the Islamists will ultimately be the ones who win out, and LFI supporters will end up as what he calls the colocus, the duped ones. So, Goldnettle's analysis, and look, whether you agree with it or not, paints a picture of a profound ideological battle. And it leaves us with a big question. What does a critique this deep, this polarizing, really tell us about the fractures we're seeing, not just in French politics, but in our entire political world today?